And welcome back to the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Sunday afternoon. Hopefully we have a great day of baseball, but most importantly, the trade deadline is right around the corner, and finally we have some trades to announce. There was quite a few moves made over the last couple of days. Let's dig into them. Alrighty, so the trades that we've seen over the last few days include guys like Zach Eflin going to the Baltimore Orioles, guys like Austin Hayes, kind of a contender for a contender trade there with the Phillies and Orioles coming together on a trade. Sir Anthony Dominguez and Christian Pache traded once again, go the other way to the Orioles. We saw Jazz Chisholm end up with the New York Yankees. I know there was some within the New York media that wondered how he would fit, one, with the New York media, how he would fit with that clubhouse, how he would fit in that outfield, and how he would fit on that team. Well, the Yankees just said, the heck with it. He's our best choice. We're going to go with Jazz Chisholm. There was a number of suitors for him out there. The Pirates were heavily invested in that negotiation, as well as the Seattle Mariners. Mariners get their guy by bringing in Randy Arozarena. Yes, that Randy, the one who had that great postseason in 2020, back in the bubble and so forth. And he has his ups and downs, bit of a streaky hitter. Started the year off rough, he was trying to go the other way a little bit more, kind of diversify his swing a little bit, but he's certainly turned it on over the last couple of months. Tampa Bay Rays certainly have opened the doors. They traded away Jason Adam. He goes to the San Diego Padres for a heavy package that goes the other way. 3 top 15 prospects for an 8th inning setup guy go to San Diego, or go from San Diego to the Rays. Just an incredible get by the Rays to be able to turn Adam into 3 significant pieces in return from the Padres. And then Philadelphia, the big one according to Jeff Passan at least, they get Carlos Estevez in exchange for a couple of rising starting pitcher prospects from the in exchange for a couple of starting pitching prospects to the LA Angels. Now, is this the move that propels them over the top in that NL picture? Remains to be seen. The Dodgers, of course, are looking for stars. They were interested in Randy Arozarena as well. I would not be surprised if they end up with at least one starting pitcher of significant note. Garrett Crochet, probably that one target that they're trying to pursue right now. Jack Flaherty is on the market. We've seen a couple of starters struggle in the Texas Rangers and Blue Jays series that we've seen over the last couple of days. Kikuchi struggled in his start, only was unable to get through the 5th inning, and then Michael Lorenzen for the Rangers struggled in his start, was unable to get out of the 1st inning. A couple of starters that in a depressed market for starting pitching, those guys were going to get significant returns compared to what they're worth in the, say in the off season. But those guys are, going to see a little bit more diminished return, I would estimate, based off of their recent performances. Kikuchi just continues a string of poor starts for him. And for Michael Lorenzen, I wonder if he's feeling what he did last year, the pressure of the deadline, those kinds of things. He had the injury after the trade last year as well. I wonder if that really entered his mind. And of course, it's Toronto. You never know what you're going to get with Toronto day in and day out. But appreciate you guys joining us. Welcome in Jordan, John, and Willard. Appreciate you guys joining us. Up to 15 people already. Here we go. All right. Good to be here. Couldn't agree more, Jordan. Back in Texas anyway. Went across the border for a minute there, but trade deadline is here. We're going to be live with you guys every single day up through the deadline. So make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. John Trevina, good afternoon. Are Rangers closer to being sellers yet. No, they're not going to be sellers. A 2-game losing streak against the Toronto Blue Jays does not a seller make. They were 2.5 games out of the division lead just a couple of days ago. They're 4.5 back. I would say right now the only way that the Rangers would have sold by now is if they're around 10 games back in the division. I don't think they're anywhere close to that. Even if they lose tonight and tomorrow and lose before the deadline anyway, I don't think there's any way they sell, even if they go on a 4-game losing streak right before the deadline. They're right there. The division is there for the tanking. You're looking at the Seattle Mariners. They have a great starting staff, but they have a number of injuries on their roster right now. As I mentioned, Randy Arozarena has been up and down. He's been hot lately. But they still have a very poor lineup, to put it mildly anyway. But as far as the Rangers go, there's no way they're going to be sellers. They could kind of sell off a piece or two because they're going to have some roster crunch issues after the trade deadline with the return of Molly, with the return of Young, Carter, Bradford, DeGrom. They're going to have to open up 5 active roster spots in addition to some 40-man spots. So that's why they might deal from a plethora of starting pitching that they do have. Another guy that's been mentioned a few times here at the deadline is John Gray. $13 million salary at the beginning of the year. He's got $5-6 million left on that deal right now. I think it's 5.5 right now. If they moved off of him, they would save a little bit of money. And remember, this ownership group is not willing to go above that tax threshold. They were basically told that at the outset of the offseason last year. The managed front office and the players on the team and the management staff all said, hey, we want Jordan Montgomery back. They couldn't make it work with the money, and ownership did not budge. And this is an ownership group that had flush with money because of all the money they made in the World Series. Sure, they didn't have the TV deal money, and that was the restriction that they were really operating from the beginning of the year. But it seems like ownership has not flexed from that stance. They are not budging. They spent significantly. So Rangers fans, I get that you're hungry and you want to continue to win. And the Rangers still are in great shape to do so, even if they don't add here at the deadline. But the Rangers ownership group should not be faulted in any way because they went out there and spent when this team did not have to spend at all. You look at the investment that they made in just Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, and John Gray, $500 million when they were a losing team, and then they doubled down on it with one of the biggest starting pitcher contracts ever in Jacob deGrom. This ownership group has certainly spent, and it's time for the team, the front office group, to make things work around the periphery so that ownership doesn't have to continue to spend. So you want to continue to make yourself a winning team, and winning teams are not built just through free agency. You got to draft and develop. They have some good young prospects that are already on the roster and some more that are on the way. It's up to Chris Young to push it across the finish line. Other than the fact that my Jays will have no one left by the end of tomorrow, well, they did trade Danny Jansen. They traded away Nate Pearson as well. They traded away Garcia. There's a couple more pieces that they can move here. I would expect the rest of their expiring deals to go. And then there is always the possibility that they move on from Vlad Guerrero Jr. I don't think that's entirely likely. I don't think any team is going to blow the doors off of him. You look at all the trades that we've seen so far, some minor level trades as far as prospect returns, even in the Randy Arozarena trade, which we still have yet to see what the player to be named later is. The speculation is that, hey, he was really given up for 2 borderline prospects that while they're sure on the rise, they're not necessarily worth what we would have thought Randy Arozarena was worth on the open market. So that player to be named later had better be worth something. So remains to be seen what the return actually is for him. But it does seem like prices are a little bit depressed. As we're getting closer to the deadline, though, even over the last 24 hours, we're starting to see a rise in the return for pieces that are being moved. Most notably, Carlos Estevez, as we mentioned, from the Angels to the Phillies in exchange for 2 pretty good starting pitching prospects that were outside of the top 20 coming into the year. They are clearly inside the top 10 right now. Based off of their AA performances, they look like they're going to be good starting pitchers at the major league level. They proved themselves at the AA level, which is usually the proving ground in the minor leagues to say, hey, whether or not the prospect's going to make it or not, and they certainly have acquitted themselves very well. We also saw the return for Jason Adam. That was the one I mentioned off the top. 3 top 15 prospects out of that Padres system is a significant return for an 8th inning setup guy. You look at Mason Miller, the closer for the Oakland A's, might not get moved from punching the table in frustration on Monday. Fractured his hand, his non-pitching hand. Just a blunder of a move by his own part. But you look at his setup guy, Ursig. You look at what Adam got in return, or what Adam was able to get the raise in return. That and some would probably be the return for Eckert. So we'll see what happens there. Willard. I think Houston sent Dodgers a message last night, and by sweeping them today, money don't buy you a World Series title. Team effort and unity does. I'm not buying that either, Willard. The Dodgers, they have a plethora of starting pitchers on the injured list, and they are getting healthier. This is the end of July. We're talking about probably the second best team so far this season in baseball, at least in the National League. They're going to be right there in the NL Championship Series, I believe, facing the Philadelphia Phillies. They're right there. Those two teams are head and shoulders above everybody else on the NL side. But I do get your point. Houston is doing very well, being able to kind of rise from the ashes that they were early in the season when they had their issue with starting pitchers being out due to injury. And they really struggled during that same period. Dodgers, meanwhile, are still second in the NL with their injuries that they've had to deal with. So I'd pump the brakes there on, beefing up your Houston Astros talk and puffing your chest out, because we're talking about the same Houston Astros team that had the same injury issues that the Dodgers had to start the year, and they couldn't keep their head above 500. They couldn't keep their head above fourth in the division. The Dodgers, meanwhile, are still head and shoulders above everybody else in the NL West. They're still the second best team in the National League, and without the Phillies there, they still be talked about as a World Series favorite on the NL side. You think the Astros do make a trade or just make excuses like Dana Brown dreaming he's in Atlanta, not Houston? Well, the Astros, like we've mentioned in previous videos, they have a depressed farm system. Most of those guys have aged out. The other pieces they've traded away, and they haven't really held on to much talent out there. Now, that doesn't mean that they're completely without talent in the minor leagues. It just means that they don't have the same talent that, say, a Baltimore Orioles or the Los Angeles Dodgers have that they could go out and make a trade with. Same thing with the Braves that you mentioned in that comment there. They no longer have the top farm system in the entire game. They have the same issues Houston does, lack of prospects. That's why we're seeing a lot of depth trades out there right now, going for quantity rather than quality. And in that type of a market, Houston may hold a candle to some of these other offers from other teams. Now, I do expect them to add a first baseman here. Yandy Diaz, Isaac Paredes, probably the top two guys that they could possibly add. Paredes then would shift over to third base after the year if they lose Bregman. That'd be a good get for them. As a Rangers fan, I would hate to see them get Paredes, but he'd be a perfect fit for that team. Yandy Diaz had some issues, we'll put it that way, over the last week or two that put him on the restricted list. It remains to be seen how that affects him down the stretch, but he is not having as good of a year as he had last year. He's still an above average hitter right now, but he's over that 30-year-old mark, and it does seem like he's a little bit on the decline. If those numbers continue to decline, will a team like the Rangers or the Astros really be interested because of the issues that they have with how he might age for the remainder of that deal? Yanks, appreciate you joining us, as well as Paranormal. Thank you guys for joining us once again. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Snell to the Yankees. Yankees are one of 6 teams, according to John Heyman, that's kicking the tires on Blake Snell, who looks absolutely dominant now for the first time pretty much since the year started. You look at how he really started the year, coming into spring training late, obviously, signing very late, and ultimately getting rocked in his first couple of months of the season. His last 3 starts, though, he looks like the Blake Snell of old, and he does have a strong track record in the second half of years. Now, remains to be seen how he's able to keep himself healthy the rest of the year because of that late spring training, how the innings might tax him, those kinds of issues. But one comment that I will make here is that the San Diego Padres, a team that are really going for it this year, even after trading Juan Soto, bringing in Luis Arraez already and Dylan Cease from the Chicago White Sox earlier, 2 of the greatest trades that we've seen before July, or before the calendar even turned to July in MLB history. Great trades, by the way. Ultimately, he did not give up his entire farm system, but his farm system is a lot thinner there. But they were able to still add a good setup guy. That's the one hole I saw on their roster is bullpen. They addressed that. Now they have an injury issue concerning that starting rotation with Darvish and Musgrove, which is why they're at least kicking the tires on bringing back Blake Snell. The reason why I bring them up anyway is that the former team here is wanting to bring him back. That tells you they see what he's doing there in San Francisco, and they see that this is a positive trend. So for the other teams that are in the Blake Snell market, I would take this as a boon for his services. What I mean by that is what the Padres see in him is that it's only going to get better, or at least continue to be what it's been over the last 3 starts for him. And that's what the Padres are looking at right now. Of course, the salary is a big concern there, especially for next year. Injury concerns, if he does regress, if he does stumble, all those kinds of things are big factors here at the deadline. But with that big salary, it's not going to take a whole lot to bring him in. I heard a couple of reports out there that Robbie Ray is also drawing a couple teams' interest right now. Big time contract there as well. I'm not sure the Giants move him, but Blake Snell they might want to give off or get off of that investment right now. Yankees fan here, welcome in. If Houston, I would trade for Cody Bellinger. Bellinger is out there. His name is being dangled out there. But they made the trade to bring in Nate Pearson. Maybe they want to get off the contract of Bellinger. But the Cubs, I don't think, are kicking in the towel by any means. And I don't think there's a trade there. Any news on the Giants? We just spoke about Blake Snell. We touched on Robbie Ray as well. They have a couple of players that are on expiring deals that could be moved as well. Mike Yastrzemski is also drawing interest, possibly from the Texas Rangers. Michael Conforto from the New York Mets. There's a couple of pieces that the Giants have that could interest other teams, but don't expect wholesale changes there. I am surprised, though, that the Giants realize their position, and even though I believe Farhan Zaidi is going to be fired within the next 3 weeks, just because of how poorly he's been able to build this team up since his tenure really started there, and his inability to bring in top-flight free agents, ultimately settling for their C, D, and F plans, whatever you want to call them. Matt Chapman, Robbie Ray trade, Blake Snell, all those guys brought in when they weren't necessarily their number one target. Guys that pop to mind are Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, Carlos Correa, Aaron Judge, all these guys that they missed on and ultimately had to settle for these consolation prizes. Michael Conforto being the worst of that bunch, I believe, but maybe they can offload what's left of that deal to the Mets. Astros can't make any deals because their farm system is garbage. Absolutely agree with that one, but I don't think they can't make any deals. Their farm system is nowhere near what it used to be. It's not necessarily hot garbage, but there are a few pieces there in Houston that might draw the eye of some other sellers out there. They have a couple of outfielder prospects that they could deal, and most of their starting pitching prospects are a little bit older and right at the major league level right now, or breaking into the big leagues or close to it. And so if you're willing to play for one of those guys or take on one of those guys, not that they have a great ceiling or anything like that, but they've proven that they're at least ready for the next step. And maybe the Astros can reap the rewards of building them up to this point. But the Astros no longer have, anybody in the system that's an Alex Bregman or Carlos Correa type or anybody like that in their system anymore. It's just devoid of talent. There's still a few pieces there, and they may have to offload what's left of it to be able to, save their season this year for one last run at a World Series. Let me get this straight. You think Houston can't hang with the Yankees or Baltimore, or Braves or Dodgers? Houston beat them all despite Houston's record. No one wants to face Houston when they play Houston. As a Rangers fan, I would love to face Houston. I'm not saying that they're, a slouch or that they're, next to the Chicago White Sox, but I am saying that they are injury riddled, that they are top heavy, and this is the last time they're really going to be considered a World Series favorite team, or at least a World Series contender in the American League, because of how their free agents are set to go over the next couple of years. Bregman's just the tip of the iceberg. Then you got Verlander, you got Valdez, you got Tucker, Alvarez. All those guys they've got issues with in the next year or two, and they spent the money on Josh Hader, a closer. Leaves a lot of question marks around a team that doesn't like to spend at the top of the free agent market. Notably, Jim Crane has let multiple starters go away. Looking at Garrett Cole, Verlander when he left to go to the Mets, Carlos Correa, George Springer, and they had the prospects within the system to weather that storm. They no longer have that luxury. So Willard, I know you're a Houston fan, but this is probably the last really good run they're going to have. I'm not saying any team is necessarily licking their chops to face them, but out of all the other contenders that are out there, Baltimore on the American League side, I really like their lineup and their starting pitching. I expect them to add one more starter before the deadline. They're still probably one more elite starter away from being a behemoth on the American League side. The Yankees have really struggled with that lineup over the last month or so. They really have seen their difficulties. There's no real team on the AL side like the NL. You look at the Phillies, the Dodgers, those teams are clear, far and away the best teams on the NL side to me. Yes, the Dodgers did lose twice now to the Astros on consecutive days, but I would like to see them face each other in a postseason series when both teams are healthy. The Astros are catching them when the Dodgers are without their best complement of starters right now. They're getting some of them back and healthier, sure, but I still expect them to add here at the deadline, maybe a Garrett Crochet. Astros have no such chip that they can pull, and they're really, they're a boxer in their final round, if you will. Just kind of stay in the race in the AL West, trying to stay in that World Series contention status, and we shall see what happens from there. Is Scoble going to the Yankees? Good question there, Steve. Appreciate you joining us. Got 25 of you guys with us right now. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe if you guys are new here. We're going to be live with you guys every single day through the deadline, so make sure you guys join us. But is Scoble going to the Yankees? To answer your question, Scoble, if he goes anywhere, and I mean anywhere, I believe he's going to go to the Baltimore Orioles. Why? He's got some control left, which is key for them. They really need to get some control on the back half of a deal for a starting pitcher. That's why these rental options that are out there, they're only giving up the middling prospects for them. A guy that they were able to bring in, a controllable starter in Zach Eflin, didn't cost them at the top of their market for what they have in their minor or in their prospect pool. So the Orioles, I believe, are in the best position to capitalize on a Scoble trade. Now, the Yankees, of course, have Dominguez. They have Spencer Jones. They've shown some unwillingness, if you will, to at least include either of them in a big trade. They would have to include probably one, if not both of them, in a trade for Scoble to really compete with an Orioles offer. I don't think they'll actually do so anyway, so it's really a moot point either way. Scoball's very unlikely to be traded as well. The other team that's a team to watch for Scoball is the LA Dodgers. They have a number of prospects they could trade from to be able to bring him in, and they are star hunting. They're not looking to nibble around the edges, bringing in an innings eater type at the back end of the rotation or somebody who can be a platoon. They're looking for stars to make an impact for a World Series destined team in the NL to really compete with the Phillies and overtake them. So if they're going to make a move, it'd be at the level of Scoball, Crochet, somebody of that level for the Dodgers to really make a move. But the Yankees, I would say, probably finish a distant third or fourth in the running for Tarek Scoball. With the players coming off of injury and the plethora of players that will need to be moved, what would be the best scenario for the Rangers to get a haul for a good prospect? Well, the best case scenario for them to acquire a prospect is probably their starting pitching. They could deal John Gray, they could deal Michael Lorenzen, but they're not going to really have the big sell-off that everybody was hoping for in the industry anyway. The Nathan Eovaldi's, the Max Scherzer of the world, the Adolis Garcias of the world. Those guys are going nowhere. And so as far as what could the Rangers get in a trade, middling prospects is what I would expect to be moved. Rangers do like to go quantity as well when they get these returns. They like to get one or two pieces that their scouts have had an eye on for a year or two within an organization and just see if they can pry them off with a trade. Now, if they move off of Lorenzen, if they move off of Gray, that would free them up to possibly add a reliever here at the deadline or possibly a right-handed hitting designated hitter. Brett Rooker's been mentioned, as well as Yandy Diaz. Paredes has been mentioned as well. But the Rangers are looking for at least one more bat. I would suspect Diaz, if he was performing at the level he was last year, would be number one on the Rangers board. Nathaniel Lowe has played well over the last couple of months, but that was the real hole in their lineup to come into the season, at least in my eyes, was how Nathaniel Lowe is going to look this year. He's looked significantly better over the last couple of months. There is a hole at the DH spot right now, but with the emergence of Josh Smith, they're going to probably use that DH spot for Josh Young or to move around the lineup with Josh Smith as well, give guys a day off their feet. But they could use an outfielder as well, so an outfield bat. So they have Travis Jankowski, a good speed guy, but my belief is that he probably won't survive the trade deadline on the active roster. Doesn't mean that he'll be cut or traded. I do think there is an opportunity for them to be able to put him on the injured list, those kinds of things to keep him on the roster like they did with Brad Miller last year. And then around the playoff time, if they need somebody with speed, he's already still there on the roster. They can put him on the active roster for the playoffs. Game is started there between Toronto and Texas. Toronto making an error there. Guerrero unable to scoop the Clement toss over to first. Rangers get their first runner on against Barrios. The Toronto Blue Jays have a couple of starters that I'm keeping an eye on today as well. Barrios being one of them, as Seager follows that up with a first pitch single into center. 2 on, nobody out there in that Rangers and Blue Jays game. Rangers looking to rebound after a tough couple of losses against this Blue Jays team. But Blue Jays, I imagine, are on the last legs of this team right now. They're trying to prove their value on the open market for one, and two, prove their worth to this team through the deadline. After the deadline, I'm expecting a full collapse from some of their veterans. So, keep an eye on what the Blue Jays do over the next couple of days. But the starters that I mentioned that I'm keeping an eye on, one, Chris Bassett. A number of teams have already called about him. There's really no reason for them to hold on to him with the money that he's due next season. Double play ball here from Josh Smith, 2 out. Oh, didn't get the runner at first. Runners at the corners. Another rough play there by the Blue Jays. But anyway, Blue Jays have some other starters that I'm keeping an eye on as well. Kikuchi is one of those that I expect to be moved. Barrios is another one who has good numbers as far as strikeouts. The big issue for him is the home runs. If he could just limit the home runs, he, I believe, would be a number 2 in a great rotation out there. But as it stands right now, with the home runs he gives up, it's just not feasible for a team to take him on with that full salary. If the Blue Jays want to offload some of that salary and try to reset their payroll, those kinds of things over the next year or so, with the management already being under the gun, with their contracts expiring after next year, they're going to have to make some ingenious moves here to make themselves viable next year. Because right now, this is not a team on the upswing. This is not a one-year blip. This has been an underperforming team for years. So keep an eye on what the Blue Jays might do here at the deadline. Seem to forget in the offseason they can rebuild and re-sign a free agent. Bill, I know you're a Rangers fan, but for giving vibes if Houston is healthy in postseason against the Dodgers. Well, if the Astros are healthy in any postseason series, they are still a formidable team. That's why I said this is probably the last year of them being a World Series contender. Now, as far as them being able to re-sign some of their own guys, absolutely. But has Jim Crane ever shown a willingness to go to the top of the market for any of his own free agents? Absolutely not. I mean, you look at the pieces that he's been able to retain. A guy like Jose Altuve took a team-friendly extension just not too long ago to stay with the team until he retires, most likely in 5 years. You look at the pieces that are coming up. Kyle Tucker, Yordan Alvarez, Framber Valdez, Justin Verlander, Alex Bregman. Those are a number of pieces that they're going to have to give big-time free agent dollars to. They might be able to retain 2, 3 of them, but to expect them to retain every single one of those guys, let alone add to this team after that, that's a big ask. It's a big ask because they haven't done it before. They haven't had they don't have the prospects right now to replace them if they don't keep them on the Major League roster. And they could go out there and spend and add free agents on the open market that are less costly than their own guys. Absolutely. They could still maintain a playoff contender status. But for them to be considered a World Series contender, they built this thing up really well. It's hats off to them for building up the team that they have. But they are not going to be able to be viewed, in my eyes, the same way once they continue to lose more of these pieces without having the depth in the minors to replace them. Diaz was really the last piece that they had to really get it done. Alrighty, Houston will own the Dodgers when healthy. I don't believe that would happen. I think the starting pitching for the Dodgers is significantly better. I think the lineup for Houston right now is a little bit better, but I think after the deadline we could see the Dodgers add one more big-time bat. Remains to be seen who that could be, but right now I would lean Houston has a better lineup. But in a postseason series, I still believe in the Dodgers over the Astros. Definitely need someone in their bullpen. For Yankees, I still need an extra bat. I absolutely agree there. The Yankees, I believe, need to add at least one more pitcher. Remains to be seen where they go for that. They've been interested in some starting pitching out there. They've touched base on a number of different relievers out there as well. But an extra bat, a corner infielder, might not be as big of a need now after the trade for Jazz Chisholm. But my favorite target for them before the trade deadline was going to be Ryan McMahon. He's not going to be moved by the Rockies. Looks like he's staying put. I'm curious to see which direction they go if they add another infielder. But so far, the Yankees have done a nice job here at the deadline. If the only thing they do is bring in Jazz Chisholm, it at least gives them another above-average player in their lineup, because that lineup is pretty much devoid of talent outside of Judge and Soto right now. They are going to get a couple of guys back from injury, so keep your eyes peeled for what they might add as well to that lineup. But they've really struggled to kind of keep things rolling there. Remains to be seen what happens. Don, I just saw your comment. My apologies for missing it. Appreciate you joining us. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Paredes, Scoball, Scott. Shopping list is done. Well, those are 3 big names that are available here on the market. Scott, I believe, is probably the best closer still on the market. Pretty much every team that's in a playoff position right now, or at least contending for one, is looking at him. Um, as far as Paredes goes, there's the Mariners are said to be in there. The Dodgers are on the periphery. Astros are in there as well as the Rangers. Pirates are looking for some line or for some offensive input anyway, or for an offensive boost, if you will. Scoball though is probably the rarest of those that might get traded. Appreciate you, Paranormal, loving the show. Thank you, thank you. Steve, we need another closer in Flaherty or Tyon or Green. Hold on here. Flaherty is going to be your rental starter right now that I think most teams are interested in outside of Baltimore. Baltimore, it'd be really difficult to see them making the same risk twice, but he really is the type of starter that they need if they are unable to find a controllable one here at the deadline, like a Crochet that they're willing to make a move for. Short of that, Flaherty, I think his market right now, you're looking at the teams that need some starting pitching. The Cardinals could use some, of course, but his market is pretty much all over the place right now. But let us know where you guys think these trades are going to end up going. But let's go ahead and recap some of the trades that we've seen already. First one I want to mention is, again, that Padres deal for Jason Adam from the Rays. 3 top 15 prospects for an 8th inning setup guy. We've seen a number of setup guys go so far, and there's still a few more on the market. So we're going to see a number of relievers over the next 48 hours move. So that's a great return for the Rays, and this, I think, reinforces the prices out there right now are continuing to rise. So the longer you wait, the higher the price you may pay. I know buyers usually like to wait till the very last minute to see if prices drop before the deadline. I don't think that's happening this year anyway. I think that we're going to see prices at least stay the same, if not rise, over the next couple of days, mainly because there's so few sellers out there and more pieces have already been moved. So relievers, to Michael, to your point there, relievers are so overpriced at this deadline. I would have said early at this deadline that relievers are actually a little bit below. Now with the Estevez trade and Adam, those guys are going for significant prices right now. I'm curious to see what happens. Trainer is out there on the mound for the Rangers. I'm wondering if it's a blister issue here for John Gray. They're looking to the bullpen. They're getting some guys up. Looks like John Gray might not actually make this start. He might have felt something. The issue for the Rangers today is that they already had, Gray is coming out. Bochy is taking the ball. Yikes. Rangers really would like to have, gone into this trade deadline with a couple of wins, but watching his setup here. Was it his hip? Watching his replay again. Ankle? Left ankle on his plant foot, maybe? I can't tell, but did not look natural at the very end in his follow-through. Like he felt something just as he was getting off the mound. And Rangers are going to have to go this game without their starter even throwing a pitch today. They had to use both of their long men in the game the other day when Michael Lorenzen could not get out of the first inning. Looks like they're going to go with Jonathan Hernandez to at least get this one going. Not looking good today if you're a Rangers fan for John Gray. Good news for them, though, in the minor leagues. Mahle has completed his 5th rehab start. He looks like he is about ready to come to the majors. I would not be surprised if Gray does end up on the injured list, if he immediately goes into rotation into Gray's spot. They also have Cody Bradford, who's probably going to end up as a long guy out of that bullpen, but they could also move him up here in the next day or two if Gray does miss time. But Lorenzen, I'm imagining, probably available out of the bullpen today after he was only able to get 2 outs in yesterday's game if they really need somebody to throw innings today. Appreciate you joining us, Pierce. Any updates on when we might be getting DeGrom back? The update there is we're probably looking at the end of the month of August. I would expect probably September call-up for him. They don't want to rush him back, but it does look like he's starting to throw live BP. And then we should start to see him start throwing some rehab assignments here in the next 2 weeks or so. He has to throw 3 live BPs, and that's when they'll probably put him out for a rehab assignment. Probably have him pitch an inning, then 2, then 2 again, then 3, then 4, and then just see where he's at after that 4-inning rehab start. See how many pitches he's built up to, and at that point, if they want to bring him up, they will. But the Rangers have some starting pitching options that other teams don't here as we get closer to the deadline. They're going to have probably 10 different starting pitchers, 11 guys that they can turn to at any point, whether they be coming back from injury or guys that have already been on the Major League roster. And then they have a couple more guys in the minors. So Bochy is talking to Michael Lorenzen right now. I wonder if he's telling him, hey, I know I didn't throw much for you yesterday. You want me to go down to the bullpen? Lorenzen is talking to Bochy and Maddox. They're all nodding. I wonder if Lorenzen is about to go down to that bullpen, see if he can at least get loose. Lorenzen is one of the few pitchers that you would consider a true athlete. Was able to hit when he was in the minor leagues, a good pinch runner at times when he was younger. But he's a guy that's might be able to rebound rather quickly here and give him a couple innings. Jonathan Hernandez giving all the time that they can right now. We just talked about that one. Really surprised Friedman hasn't made any prominent moves yet. Well, it is the Sunday before deadline. So good news for you, Mr. Michael, is that we should see some significant deals today. I would not be surprised if we see some big names that we weren't exactly expecting to be moved to surprisingly be moved here at the deadline. There's always 1 or 2 names that come out of nowhere that a team was either offloading money for or a team just didn't like the clubhouse fit, and we haven't seen any of those guys really moved yet at this deadline. So I would not be surprised here if today is the day we see some of those surprise names start to get moved. John Gray just got hurt in warm-ups. Yes, Jordan, we were just talking about that one. Do you think the Cardinals can become sellers? They look listless right now, and they have a bad run differential. I'm kind of glad you mentioned that one, Michael. Let's flip over to the standings real quick, just so you can kind of see. Let's look at the NL Central since we just mentioned the Cards. Right now, they're 6 games back in the NL Central, 2 back in the wild card. To your question, do they become sellers? No. I know they have not looked good this year. They do, in your words, look listless. But to me, this is a team that just needs one more veteran pitcher to come in there and stabilize things. They don't really need anybody to overwhelm any of the teams there. You look at the 3 teams at the top of this division, losing 2 in a row, losing 3 in a row, losing 2 in a row. And none of those teams are really running away with things. A negative 49 run differential, and they're still only 6 games back. Tells you there's room for improvement. And while the Brewers have been better than expected this year, some regression is expected. And those young guys haven't been through a test yet of a pennant race. Meanwhile, the Cardinals have a number of guys who have been through this race before that know how to get the job done, and so they may have better performance, stronger performances anyway, down the stretch here. So the Cardinals, to answer your question, they should not be sellers. They should be looking to add some starting pitching here. They were a team that would have been interested in guys like Eovaldi or Scherzer should they have been available from the Rangers. Looks like Hernandez is about ready to go. Rangers getting a tough break with their starter today being pulled after his last warm-up pitch. He felt something on that last one. Remains to be seen what the actual injury is. Checking Twitter right now, just to see if there's been any announcements. Doesn't look like it. But anyway, so that's where we're at with the deadline. Now, back to our trades that we've already seen so far. One bit of news today is that the Cardinals did designate Giovanni Gallegos for assignment. I would imagine a team that's looking for a Michael Kopech type of arm, somebody that they could put back there in their bullpen, get him back to performing like he was in his early days with the Cardinals. They might try to rehab him that way. Think of teams like the Rockies who might claim him off of waivers here at the deadline. Winker was traded from the Washington Nationals, one of their 2 outfielders that they're expected to move here at the deadline, to the New York Mets. The Mets have made some nice additions to their outfield and to their bullpen here over the last 48 hours. Should be an interesting one there. Yankees do acquire Jazz Chisholm. Good trade for both teams in my estimation. The Marlins really needed to offload a lot of that talent. They are not expected to be a championship team, obviously, this year or next. They have some great starters coming back. Their starting pitchers that they do have, that they were expecting to be able to trade if they were not a good team this year, are not healthy. Guys like Yuri Perez, Luzardo isn't healthy right now. Either that or they're having poor seasons, and they're just not having the year that most people would have expected them to, at least from the pitching standpoint. They don't have that much to sell, so good to see them pull the trigger on a trade like Chisholm to get that one going. So many trades in division so far. Absolutely. We've seen a lot in both the AL East and NL East, swapping players between their own teams. Paul, welcome back. Appreciate you joining us once again. Does a Colorado sweep stop the Giants from selling? No. I think Giants realize the writing is on the wall, that they're not going to be competing with the likes of the Dodgers or Phillies. I doubt they view themselves as a team like the Braves or the Mets or any one of those teams. I think they view themselves in that next tier of teams. But if they decide to hold here at the deadline, maybe that's an inclination. They believe they can at least snake one of those final wild card spots with a healthy Webb, with a healthy Robbie Ray, with a healthy Blake Snell. They have some good starters that they could really have a great rotation if they get into a postseason series. But that lineup does not scare anybody, and so they are going to be sellers, it looks like, at this year's deadline, and correctly so. Yikes. Jonathan Hernandez comes in for the injured John Gray and immediately gives up a walk and a wall ball double. Ouch. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Well, Rangers probably we're hoping to at least salvage the final game. They're really good at salvaging the final game of a series this year. I believe they've done it like 6 or 7 times where they lose the first 2 games of a series and end up getting the last one to at least salvage something out of it, to at least keep them in the picture in the AL West. Today looks like it's going to be an uphill task with their starter going down. Man, I hope so. They move Snell, Chapman, Wade, Yaz. Yaz sounds like his market is pretty strong. Snell has a lot stronger market than I would have thought. Wade has had his name bandied about as well. Pierce, not Hernandez. We are done for today. Him and Latz, I never can trust when they're going to be on the bump. Well, Latz has had a tough last month or so, but that's to be expected with a young pitcher. He'll get it back. But you had to have somebody who could come out here and at least eat up some innings. And hopefully, maybe they get Michael Lorenzen out of the bullpen today to give him a few. Who knows? But rest of the trades we've seen so far, Phillies getting Carlos Estevez for a couple of strong minor league prospects. Good return for the Angels, but they have a number of players that are being talked about right now. According to Heyman, Rengifo and Taylor Ward are 2 names being discussed fervently today. I would expect one or both of those guys to get moved before the deadline. The Angels, though, it doesn't sound like they're going to move off of Trout, obviously. Injury issues, low numbers, all those kinds of things. The starting pitcher that they could move is Tyler Anderson as well. Danny Jansen goes to the Red Sox in exchange for 3 minor league prospects. Nice return for a catcher on an expiring deal. The Rockies have a couple of catchers on expiring deals. Those are the next catchers to go off of the market. Clevenger was an arm that might have been available here at the deadline. He is out for the rest of the year. Brewers get a reliever, Nick Mears from the Rockies. And it sounds like the A's are reluctant to at least trade a guy like Brent Rooker. The A's, with the nice strides that they've made offensively the last month and a half, they believe that this team is starting to turn a corner as far as talent. Butler has been a great piece for them, really helping turn this team around. Rooker having a career year, by his estimations. Really high strikeout rate, though. I'm not sure his timeline really fits with the contention window for the A's, but they believe they've shown significant strides this year, much like the Royals have done this year. At least they view themselves that way anyway. But in my estimation, they've shown some strides offensively, sure, but the pitching is just not there. There's nothing really to hope on aside from a couple of relievers in your bullpen, and they don't really have much to go off of. But looking at the deadline here, they could have gotten a really nice price for Brent Rooker, probably the best bat here at the deadline outside of Paredes that could be moved. They could have gotten a fair price for him and possibly gotten a couple of good starting pitching prospects. We just saw what the return was for Carlos Estevez. Something similar would have been expected for Brent Rooker, if not better. And ultimately, it sounds like the A's might forego that route unless the doors are blown off by an offer for him. You suspect the Dodgers will get Tanner Scott because it looks like Evan Phillips got space jammed this last month. Scott's going to have interest from all of the clubs that are in contention. Dodgers are star hunting. They could use a bullpen piece. If they're going to add one, Scott makes a lot of sense. I get the impression, though, they're looking for bigger game, though, than even Tanner Scott. I think they're looking for a starting pitcher. Garrett Crochet is probably the biggest one to mention here. Varsho, 2-run homer, 3-0 Toronto, bottom of the first. Yikes. Yikes, yikes, yikes. If you're the Rangers, do you go after Diaz or Paredes? Harder if we go after a bat. For the Rangers, they have a number of pieces that are coming back. They, of course, have Ezekiel Duran in the minors, who's starting to turn things around offensively. He's expected to be back as well. Young and Carter are two more position players that are going to be coming back. You want to get the biggest impact for the least cost, if you will, if you're a Rangers front office executive. You also don't want to increase the salary too much. Both of those guys make reasonable salaries this year. Paredes has a couple of years left to control. Probably the higher price of the two. Probably going to cost you a couple of premium assets in return. Diaz probably the more gettable of the two. So if I'm the Rangers, I would probably go after Diaz, even though I think Paredes probably be the better fit in the long run. But I think the price is going to be a little bit too exorbitant, especially when you consider the Mariners are going to be in there as well as the Astros. Diaz, I think the Astros might be your biggest competition, maybe the Pirates as well, but his price is going to be a little bit less, especially with his numbers being a little bit diminished. I think there's some real opportunity there for a team to get that bat away from the Rays and see what they have come the end of the season with that lineup. But 3-0, not bad for losing your starter, I suppose, before he even throws a pitch in the game. But a rough way to begin this one for sure for Texas. We'll check in on the scoreboard here shortly, but let's look in at the standing and just see where everybody is as we get close to the deadline here. We'll start in the AL East. Top two teams clearly buyers here, Orioles and Yankees. They already made a couple of significant moves, bringing in Eflin for the Orioles as well as Sir Anthony Dominguez. Yankees bringing in Jazz Chisholm. Red Sox making a move and bringing in Danny Jansen as a catcher. They're a team I would expect is going to try to compete for a wild card spot. This is no longer the Red Sox of our youth. Red Sox back in the day would try to compete with the Yankees dollar for dollar at the top of the market. Those days seem to be long gone with Chaim Bloom there, and it seems like they're going about things a little bit differently. The Red Sox have always had an affinity for the Billy Beane way of doing things out in Oakland, working around the margins, not spending at the top of the market. Seems like they finally have a front office that mirrors their desire as a ownership group. And this is what we're going to see now, I believe, from the Red Sox for the foreseeable future. You're not going to see them be a behemoth in the AL East like the Yankees from a payroll standpoint like they once were. So this is probably about what you could expect going forward here as well. Jays have a chance to sweep only their second series of the year. Sorry it comes at the Rangers' expense. True. But Rangers have done this before, stumbling into the break and then coming out a little stronger and then stumbling again. And it's a 162-game season. Every team is going to have their ebbs and flows, every single one of them. Yankees right now are in one. Astros had one earlier. Astros have obviously rebounded. I expect the Yankees will as well. Rays are a team that's selling here at the deadline already. They're 4 games back of the wild card. Even with that being said, they already have major league level replacements coming through the minors as well, and guys coming off of the injured list. So they still could sell a piece or 2 or 3 or 4 and still be able to make a run at a wild card this year. They're not going to compete for the division. They're not going to compete for a World Series. But don't be surprised if the Rays are still there 2 games out with a week or so to play here for the wild card in that AL East. Jays, though, 8.5 back of the wild card, 13 in the division. Just doesn't look good for the Jays, even though they have won a couple now against the Rangers. They already traded off a number of pieces right now. They need to get younger. They need to save a little bit of money as well. I would imagine the next trades that they do will do so. A trade of Chris Bassett makes a lot of sense with starting pitching being so in demand, if you will, on the market. Bassett could get you at least a piece or two, and even if you just get off the money, you could turn around and invest that in somebody else that you similar value to Bassett in free agency, and still get the prospect talent for the trade of him now. So I would expect the Jays to continue to trade some of their starters, Kikuchi being one of those guys I would expect to be moved. I'm with you there, Pierce. With Spores being back, they do have a deeper pen. Leclerc looks like the old Leclerc that we saw when he first got that extension 4 years ago or so. But he's had up and down performances at different times in his career. Relievers, by definition, are all streaky. There's the truly special ones are at the top of their game every single game, year in and year out. There's like 2 or 3 of those guys, walking around the league at any given time. Leclerc is outside of that group, obviously, and so you're going to have months where he looks absolutely unhittable, which is what he looks like over the last couple of times. Then you have times where it looks like he can't throw the ball for a strike if the plate was 8 feet wide. That's just the ebbs and flows of being a reliever, and right now he's in one of those really strong streaks right now. So the Rangers, if they go with a bullpen game, maybe if they just try to keep this game a little closer anyway, Leclerc might be called upon to kind of keep this game a 3-0 game here. 2 outs, not looking good offensively once again for the Rangers today. Their offense has been really struggling the entire year. Last week, it looked like they were starting to shake off a little bit of the rust. Yesterday, with Adolis Garcia getting a couple of big hits, looked like he was shaking off some of the rust. Ultimately, though, they're still the Rangers. They're still looking like they need a bat or two. Those guys could come off of the injured list, absolutely. But right now, 1, 2, 3 go the Rangers in the second, and this team just looks like they need a bat. They need a jolt in that lineup to kind of get this thing going. Maybe getting back Josh Young is the jolt in the arm, the shot in the arm that they need. But I would expect them to still add one more bat here at the deadline. Like we mentioned, a guy like Jankowski going to the bench would make a lot of sense. Let's move on to the AL Central. Guardians, of course, running away with it. 4.5 above the Twins. Royals are making a nice little run to stay in it here. 5.5 back. They've made a couple of additions now here at the deadline. Twins are sitting in wild card spot right now, as well as the Royals. Wow. If you came into the year and had the Royals on your bingo card as a wild card team, along with the Twins, and yet the Guardians would still be winning the division, you're a liar. There's no way any one of you guys had all 3 teams in playoff positioning as we get to the trade deadline. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to end up that way, but the Guardians have looked really good this year, have had really good years from pieces that you wouldn't necessarily expect, and Vogt has been a really great manager this year, should be in contention for manager of the year on the AL side. Twins, after a tough start, have really rebounded nicely. Royals, we knew they would be better. We didn't think they would be this good. Bobby Witt is absolutely an MVP candidate. If they make a wild card spot, he would probably finish in the top 2 or 3 in the MVP voting, as far as I'm concerned. We should have shipped out Duran last offseason when his value was high. Would have probably net us a nice package coming off of last year. Said the same with Tavares after last year, and thank God we didn't since Carter went down. Duran, I thought they should have packaged him probably for a closer, Bednar, but the bullpen really hadn't been as big of an issue for the Rangers. And in my estimation, if they're going to make a trade for a big-time bat, or if they want to shuffle the deck chairs a little bit around the deadline, Duran is your piece now that you could move, along with some of your starters that you've really built up a nice depth with. But as far as that goes, Pierce, I really like the fact that they held on to Duran, even though I myself was arguing that they should have gone for a reliever in Bednar. Lo and behold, did they get lucky with Kirby Yates, and they knew what they were getting in David Robertson with the investment that they made in him. They knew he would be good. But Yates, there's no way they thought for $4.5 million, whatever they ended up giving him, that he would be this good for them, and their number 1 reliever this year, an all-star. He's been a really good signing for them. Yikes. Another base hit for a struggling Toronto Blue Jays player. Not looking good for Texas today. As far as Tavares, I thought they should have traded him 2 years ago when he was still young, when center fielders were at a sky-high price. I thought they could have gotten an Adam Eaton type return for him. Right now, you're probably looking more of a middling return at best for him. Kind of a toss-in piece. He hasn't performed. It's looking like he's going to lose his job next year as a starter. Probably more of a fourth outfielder going into next year. So maybe they decide to capitalize on it in the off season. Paul, I really wish the Giants would buy, sell, get rid of the vets above, maybe Doval to rebuild, but then go all in on Paredes so we can have him for 25 to 27, especially since we're terrible at signing big hitters. I like that idea, Paul. They do need some big talent in there. Paredes would be a big get for their lineup. Probably take over the third base spot if they do move off of Chapman, which I don't think they will. For now, he could probably play a little bit of first or second for them until then. But he'd be a great get, I believe, for any team out there. Looking at Fangraphs third base, outs above average, and no third basemen are doing that good in the whole league. Well, the top third baseman in the league for years had been Adrian Beltre, Nolan Arenado, Chris Bryant defensively, those types of players, Matt Chapman. You're not really going to see those types of players right now at the big league level. There are still some great third basemen out there, but they aren't necessarily performing at the level that those guys were, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And, you still have Manny Machado out there, but he really turns it on once the calendar turns to October more than anything else. So that's where third base is right now. All right. Let's go on to the AL West. Tigers and White Sox, obvious sellers there. Don't need to dig in on those. AL West, the three teams anyway that are in contention for this division: the Astros, the Mariners, and the Rangers. For the Astros, they've had a nice little run here, winning 3 in a row. They're tops in the division once again, a game above the Mariners, 4.5 above Texas. But I think this one's going to go all the way down to the wire. I think you're probably going to get at least one playoff team out of this. You might be able to overtake one of those AL Central teams for a second wild card, or for a wild card out of this group. But I do think there will be one team left standing. Now, for the Mariners, it's all about adding one more one more bat for them. For the Astros, it's all about adding a first baseman. For the Rangers, it's about adding a bat, possibly getting some guys healthy. Whichever one is able to do their goal better, I think wins the division. Whichever one does it second wins the second spot in the wild card, I believe, and then the third team I think misses the playoffs. Angels, of course, are selling, and A's are selling. NL East, Phillies obviously made their addition with Austin Hayes, bringing in Carlos Estevez. They look like the team to beat in the NL side. Honestly, they look like the team to beat this year. That was close. Rangers are able to escape the second without giving up another run. Still 3-0 though. Braves, though, are 9.5 back in the division. They currently hold on to a wild card spot along with the Mets. Now, teams on the NL side do see some possibility that the Braves might not win a wild card this year because of the injuries in their lineup, the injuries in their rotation, and they're not sure that the lineup is going to be able to turn it around offensively enough to keep the Braves in a wild card. So this might be the one down year for the Braves, for other teams to be able to jump in there and possibly make a postseason run. Those teams seem to be incentivized to do so, and that's why we're seeing the Mets really add here at the deadline, seeing some opportunity in the division. And the Nationals recognize in this division that it's time to sell. They're selling. Same thing with the Marlins. NL Central, we've talked about this one already a bit. Brewers and Cardinals, obvious buyers. Pirates seem like they want to add some offense, some controllable offense. I'm not sure they'll be a seller or a buyer. They could do a little bit of both. They have some one-year guys that they could move off of. But what they're looking for is guys like Jazz Chisholm, some control left on their deal that they can bring in and boost their offense just a little bit. They have 3 good starters to build around for the future. The back end of their bullpen does look pretty good on paper at least, but they need to get better results back there with Bednar than they have so far in the first half. Reds and Cubs, to me, they're sellers, but the Cubs did add Pearson. They're 6 back on the wild card. It doesn't look like they're going to be sellers, but I don't necessarily view them as a buyer. A reliever trade doesn't necessarily mean they're a buyer in my estimation. I just think that this means they're looking to add some relievers to just kind of shore up a deficiency on their roster. Doesn't mean they view themselves as a playoff team, but it doesn't mean they view themselves as a seller either. For the Reds, another team that's underperformed this year, they're starting to perform a little bit better. Maybe they can get hot and get one of those wild card spots as well, but I don't expect them to really sell. The pieces that they could move mainly are going to be relievers, so keep an eye peeled for what the reliever market might look like if the Reds decide to sell some of those guys. NL West, Dodgers, of course, clearly out front, 5.5 in front of the Padres. Then you get two teams that are vying for wild card spots in the Padres and Diamondbacks. Padres have made multiple additions via the trade this year. Rise, they brought in King in the Soto deal. They brought in Dylan Cease. Now they brought in Jason Adam. The one deficiency that they really had was in that bullpen. They addressed that by bringing in Adam. They're said to be looking at some starting pitching as well, most notably Blake Snell of the San Francisco Giants. If they do something like that, I think that would be the finishing move for them to solidify their place as a wild card team this year. Diamondbacks just need to get healthy in that starting rotation. They might look at another bullpen piece even after the addition of A.J. Puck from the Marlins. They could also look for a bench bat, i.e. Tommy Pham, like they did last year. Giants seem to be willing to sell at least at the moment, looking at Yaz, looking at Snell, a couple other pieces that they could move, and Rockies have already made a couple of moves as sellers with a couple of catchers that they could move along with Gomber and Savali, Cal Quantrill out of that rotation as well. So that's kind of your standings right now as we approach the trade deadline. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Sunday afternoon. I know a lot of you guys are curious as to what's going to happen today. I will probably be doing another live later on this afternoon, maybe this evening. Depends on how big trades happen, those kinds of things. So if there's a big time trade that we see, we will probably post a video about it and then go live. One other bit of injury news, as you see on the right side of the screen there, Kodai Senga made his first start of the year, diagnosed with a high-grade calf strain, and is going to miss the rest of the regular season. Does not look good for the Mets starter there. They were really hoping that he would be the linchpin of their starting staff to try to get a wild card spot. Ultimately not going to happen. Since then, John Heyman reports that they are at least pivoting to the starting pitching market to see what is out there for them to be able to bring in. They look like they had some great depth in that starting rotation. Now it looks like they might want to add just to fortify that rotation with Senga, now going to be out for the rest of the season. Appreciate you guys joining us once again. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. We'll do some trades later on today. But just want to kind of update you guys as to what we've seen so far. And hopefully we get some big-time trades today. I'm looking at the Tampa Bay Rays, possibly Paredes, Diaz, Scott from the Marlins, looking at Crochet from the White Sox as well, Robert from the White Sox. There's some decent names that could be available here at the deadline. The Rangers could do some buying and selling. We saw that with the Orioles and Phillies with their contender for contender trade there. We could see some very interesting moves. Clerk could be a stud, mentally fragile, and gets rattled. If he's when he's on, he's a monster and unhittable. Just needs to find a way to get over that mental block. Couldn't agree more. We've taken the most big blows in terms of injury on our roster. I would argue yes, and that's why I have faith for them to write this. It's 100% it's going to come down to us and Houston. I think it's still going to be a 3-team race, though, Pierce. Call me crazy, but I think the Mariners, even though they have a couple of big-time injuries in their lineup right now, I still think they're going to add at least one more bat. Now, whether or not it's an impact bat remains to be seen, but anything is better than the below-average hitting that they have in their lineup. Same thing with the Yankees. If they just get in a major league level or better, or replacement better level or better player in their lineup, could do wonders for the lineup. Now, the starting rotation for the Mariners, it's all about that. Their bullpen has been a little bit rocky in the first half. They're finally starting to get some pieces back and healthy, though. I would be surprised if the Mariners ultimately drop out of the race, though. But I think it's going to be a 3-team race all the way to the end. I think you're going to see some weeks the Rangers look great. Some weeks the Astros look great. Some weeks the Mariners look great. But then you're also going to see them struggle at times. None of these 3 teams are nearly the behemoth that we thought they were going to be coming into the year. We thought, this Mariners rotation, and if that lineup is just league average, they'll have Ty France, Cal Raleigh. They could really have something going. Ty France isn't even on the roster anymore for the Mariners. The Rangers were expected to tread water in the first half and really come out in the second half gangbusters. They have played better in the second half, much following the script anyway. But the hitting was supposed to be the thing that carried them in the first half, and it really didn't. It was the pitching, which was thought to be the question mark coming into the year. Now they just need to get the bats really working a little bit better. They had an injury, of course, today with John Gray. Michael Lorenzen didn't pitch well yesterday, but they have a number of starters coming back, the number of position players. They just need to get those guys healthy and stay healthy once they get up to the big league level, and then figure out what they're going to do with their roster crunch situation as well. For the Astros, what they need to focus on right now is just continuing to play good baseball. shut out the outside noise, add a first baseman, keep that bullpen to perform a little bit better, see if they can continue to get it to improve and improve and improve. They struggled to begin of the year. The injuries really sidetracked them for about a month. They're playing significantly better baseball. But this is really the last great run that we're expecting with this team. And, they need to get this thing going, if they're going to be a World Series contender. Rangers finally have something cooking again. Semien and Seager are on base once again. Both of those guys are playing much better over the last month as well. Semien was in a terrible 5 for 70 slump. Wyatt Langford is in something similar right now. The rookie class this year, by the way, on the AL side is very, very thin. Wyatt Langford is nowhere near the prospect or playing at the level of prospect we thought he was coming out. He still is showing improvement, still showing that he can be a good player, but he's nowhere near the power impact that we thought he was coming onto the major league scene. We thought he was going to have speed. He's shown the speed, the ability to make consistent contact. He's making great contact, but it's ending up in outs right now. So, I expect those to start falling in and for him to perform a little bit better in August and September. But the AL picture for rookies is a little thin. In a down year for American League rookies, maybe the Rangers get another rookie or get a Rookie of the Year and get another draft pick. That's one of the things I'm keeping an eye on as a Ranger fan. But appreciate you guys joining us. We'll be live again probably around 5, 6 o'clock this evening, so make sure you guys join us for that. Drop us a like. Follow us over on X at UpsideSN. Really appreciate you guys joining us this afternoon, and y'all have a great one.